Coming up, breaking down the Dbacks comeback win against the Giants. Who has been the Dbacks offensive catalyst in July? You saw him last night. And power ranking the Dbacks trade candidates as we get closer to the deadline. Breaking it all down for you next.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, a multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. Segments 2 and 3 were recorded before last night's Dbacks game. Just want to let you know, FYI, but let's talk about last night's Dbacks game, because it felt like the Dbacks were going to be screwed by that Cooper Hummel play, but instead the Dbacks show their heart and they come back against the San Francisco Giants. And I think last night's game was a game where the Dbacks had the best manager on the field. And I don't usually say that after a lot of Dbacks games, even after their wins. I usually hate the way Torey Lovullo manages the game, but last night it was a master class by Torey Lovullo. I think the disparity between the two managers is what really stood out to me from last night's game, because Torey Lovullo, he pulls Tyler Gilbert early in last night's game in that fourth inning, because we've seen Gilbert earlier this year in starts where it starts to go awry for him early, and then all of a sudden there's 6 runs on the board and the game is blown wide open for the opponent, and it feels like the D-backs have to scratch and claw their way back, and they probably don't have the offense to do it. But when it started to get a little bit out of control for Tyler Gilbert tonight, Torey Lovullo wasted no time, and he pulled Tyler Gilbert in that fourth inning for Middleton, who got some huge outs in that inning and pitched a really clean inning after that as well. So I thought that was the first big check mark for Torey Lovullo. The second one I had was the big time trust he had in Noah Ramirez, because we know Noah Ramirez is coming off a terrible June. And in his first outing of July, the last time we saw Noah Ramirez, didn't he give up like 3 earned runs? Like, Noah Ramirez hasn't been good this season. He hasn't been good the last few times he's made an appearance, especially in high leverage moments. But in this game, Torey Lovullo went to Noah Ramirez and it paid off. Noah Ramirez had 4 strikeouts in 1.1 innings pitched. Every out he recorded was a strikeout, and it was a surprising effort by Noah Ramirez, because this was the best outing we've seen from him in a long time. Nowadays, when Noah Ramirez is out there on the mound, I start to form a headache, and I keep the Advil or the aspirin next to me, but not tonight. Noah Ramirez, very clean outing, and Torey Lovullo had the trust in him, because I would not have gone with Noah Ramirez in a very nip and tuck game like this, but good job by Lovullo to do that. And the third check mark I had for Lovullo was bringing Rojas and Daulton Varsho off the bench, because it totally worked out in this game. In the 8th inning, Rojas was the one who got the magic started with a little bunt single, and then he's just testing the pitcher the whole time on, is he going to steal? Is he not going to steal? Just applying pressure. And then Daulton Varsho, he brings him off the bench, and Varsho off the bench, I mean, he is just on a freaking heater in the month of July. And Varsho in this game, the first hit he has is a double right, just a rocket double into the alley. And then later in that 8th inning, Daulton Varsho just gives the D-backs all the insurance runs they need, because he breaks it open with a 3-run shot. So those are 3 big check marks by Torey Lovullo. And like I said before, I didn't think the D-backs were going to win this game after that Cooper Hummel misplay. Like, this was a great comeback, and without Torey Lovullo's managing, I don't think it happens. In a game this close, it felt like that break that the Giants got with the Cooper Hummel play, I felt like that break was going to be the deciding factor in this game. I thought it was going to be the reason why the Giants won this game, but it wasn't just Torey Lovullo's great managing that won this game. It was also the poor managing by Gabe Kapler, because as good as Torey Lovullo was in this game, I think Kapler was equally as bad, because I think the Giants really gifted the D-backs this win. I think the D-backs took this win by I also think in the same vein, the Giants lost this game because Kapler in that 8th inning, it was really just the 8th inning where Kapler just, it's like head scratching move after head scratching move because he just leaves in Leon way too long in the ball game. It's not like Dbacks fans are going to complain. We're all on Dbacks Twitter saying, thank you for keeping Leon in because Leon just throwing wild pitches. He's just throwing ball after ball. Like Leon is not able to throw a strike. He's just walking guys left and right. And he's the reason why the Dbacks are able to at least get one run in. And then what does Gabe Kapler do after Leon? You would think you would go with a more trustworthy reliever. And Doval has been very good this season. So let me not act like he hasn't been a trustworthy reliever, but he brings in Doval after Leon. And what happens? A 3-run shot by Daulton Varsho. Now we could just say Daulton Varsho has been hot, so let's give him more credit than giving negativity to Gabe Kapler. But that was his decision. He could have gone with a different reliever. He chose Doval, and those are the results. So you got to live with the results that Gabe Kapler put up there, and they were not very good. So this was just a beautiful Dbacks win overall. But some other highlights from this game, I just want to give a few quick shout outs. Perdomo was huge at the bottom of the order, had a couple hits with full counts. He had that huge double that gave the Dbacks their first run of the game and kept the game tied for a really long time. So I thought Perdomo was huge at the bottom of the order. Alec Thomas, I mean, I said it on Twitter. If this man is not a Gold Glove finalist, I'm going to lose my mind. The Dbacks defense has been, by the numbers, one of the best defenses in baseball. And I think if you look at the D-backs defensive statistics, since Alec Thomas has been called up, it's been one of the best defenses in baseball, specifically in the outfield. Like, I don't know how you get a base hit against that D-backs outfield when you have Alec Thomas running around center field, Daulton Varsho running around right, and then you just got the coolest, calmest guy in David Peralta manning left field. Like, it's impossible to get a hit. You have to hit them where they ain't, and they can track down most balls. Like, you're not getting many balls over the heads of Alec Thomas and Daulton Varsho. Those guys off the bat have great instincts and can absolutely just fly to the baseball. So Alec Thomas, the whole center field or the whole outfield defense has been great over the last couple of months. And Alec Thomas has been a huge reason why, making jumping, wall, leaping grabs. He's robbed home runs earlier this year from Joey Votto. Like, Alec Thomas is putting together a defensive highlight reel. And if he never works out as an offensive player, you can at least bet that Alec Thomas is going to be like a Jackie Bradley level Major League Baseball player. And that still keeps you in the game for like a decade plus. Another highlight, Daulton Varsho, like I said, just officially hot. He's been hotter as Mark Jones from ESPN, the NBA announcer, he always says, hotter than fish grease. That's what Daulton Varsho has been this month. And then my last shout out from this D-backs game goes to Buddy Candy because he had a clutch at bat. I was nervous. 1 out, bases loaded. That's a very nerve-wracking situation for D-backs fans because that just feels like an automatic double play or a strikeout, and then the next guy comes up and does nothing with the 2 outs, because that has been the story the D-backs season all year. But Buddy Candy, it felt like we were going to have that same situation again where a guy strikes out with bases loaded, 1 out, because you had 2 strikes on Buddy Candy, and he's a rookie. He hasn't had a lot of time on the Major League Baseball level, a cup of coffee, but Buddy Kennedy, I shouldn't have doubted him. He's been one of the clutchest D-backs players since he got called up, and with that high inside fastball, I don't even know what the pitch was, but it was high and tight, and Buddy Candy gave it a ride, and just the ride the D-backs needed to give them a lead before Daulton Varsho came up and broke it open. So great D-backs win, a better comeback, and if we had to hand out 3 stars of the game, I'm going to give 1 star to Daulton Varsho for what he did off the bench. I mean, he was absolutely phenomenal. 3 RBIs. He had a 3-run shot. He had a double. My second star of the game, this one's a little tougher, but I think I'm going to give it to Perdomo, who had 2 hits at the bottom of the order. He had a walk, and he's the reason why the D-backs got their first lead of the game. And then my third star of the game was going to go to the manager, Torey Lovullo, who I think gets his first star of the season. Great job managing this ball game. It was a great comeback by the D-backs, and now the D-backs have beaten the Giants. Let me double check because I always get the D-backs schedule wrong. Let me double check. D-backs have beaten the Giants in a series. Great series win by the D-backs, and we should be talking to Ben Kaspick of Locked On Giants tomorrow, so we're definitely going to be giving him some shit. Or, excuse me, I'm not allowed to say that word. We're definitely going to be giving Ben Kaspick some crap about this D-backs series win over his team, the San Francisco Giants. Now, I want to talk about a certain D-backs player that has been hotter than fish grease in the month of July and has been a huge catalyst for their offense this month. And maybe one day it will lead to some Dbacks jewelry. But if you want some jewelry for that special someone in your life, you need to head to BlueNile.com, because whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind, just like her. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your ever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right. Let's get back into the pod. And remember, part 2 and part 3 recorded before the game. Let's get into it. Now I want to talk about who has been the Dbacks catalyst in the month of June, because the Dbacks offense so far this June has been a lot better than what we've seen in the month of May and I'm so confused. So far, this month of July has been way better offensively than the month of June. I had my months confused for a second, because there has been a big catalyst in this D-backs lineup that has really put it together so far to start this month of July after struggling mightily in the month of June. And his name is Daulton Varsho, because the D-backs as a team, we know, was terrible offensively last month. The month of June, they just couldn't do anything as a team. You look up and down the lineup, like, yeah, Kelton Marte still had his 270 average and 800 plus OPS. And outside of that, like, pretty much every everyday player for the D-backs last month was just absolutely atrocious. And Daulton Varsho is one of those players that was just terrible last season. But so far to start the month of July, he's been a lot better, and it has translated to the offense for the D-backs, because the D-backs currently, as I'm recording this before today's D-backs game, or I guess when you guys are listening to this, before last night's D-backs game. So before the second game of the series against the Giants, that's when I'm recording this part of the podcast. The D-backs going into the second game were tied for their longest streak of the season, with at least 5 runs being scored of 4 straight games. Think about that. The D-backs have only scored at least 5 runs in 4 straight games 2 other times this season, and this is the longest streak they're on right now. They're tied for the longest streak right now. And so if they score at least 5 runs tonight, it'll be the longest streak the D-backs have all season of scoring at least 5 runs, which would make it 5 straight games. And a big reason why they're able to do that, a big reason why they're able to put up at least 5 runs a game, which is kind of like the bare minimum. 4 to 5 runs a game is what a team should be putting up on average. And the D-backs this season typically have not been able to do that, but they've been able to do that over the last 5 games. And a big reason why is because of Daulton Varsho, who is just finally, I mean, he still needs a larger sample size, but he's starting to look like he's heating up after that terrible month of June, where he had a 176 average and a 488 OPS in the month of June. Again, 176 average, 488 OPS in the month of June. 22 strikeouts to 16 hits total. The man had way more strikeouts than hits, and that's probably the biggest knock on Daulton Varsho's game, at least last month, and maybe throughout his whole career. Like, Daulton Varsho, fantastic player, dynamic player, one of my favorite athletes to watch in baseball right now. It's not just because he's a D-backs guy, it's because he can do a little bit of everything. But the big knock on Daulton Varsho, the man likes to strike out a lot. There's a lot of games where he has maybe as many strikeouts as hits, if not more. And we saw in the month of June, more strikeouts than hits. But so far in the month of July, he's starting to turn it around. In July so far, entering game 2 of the series against the Giants, 6 for 14, 6 RBIs, 1 home run, and 1 stolen base. His numbers this month are pretty much as good as any month he's had so far in terms of home runs, RBI. Like, I think the most RBIs he's had in a month this season is 12. He already has 6. The most home runs he's had in a month is 2. He's already got 1 this month. Like, Daulton Varsho is off to a very nice start in the month of July, and the D-backs have desperately needed it. We're seeing him drive the ball a little bit more and strike out a little bit less. And if you just kind of look at Daulton Varsho's splits month by month, it's kind of interesting because he's basically been good every other month when you look at the splits. He wasn't good that first month. He was fantastic that second month, terrible that third month, and now he's back to being good. So hopefully the good months can prevail as the season moves on, because if you remember last season, he was someone that struggled mightily before the All-Star break, but post All-Star break, Daulton Varsho came back like a new man last season, because seriously, before the All-Star break last year, it was like, is Daulton Varsho ready for the major leagues? There's a lot of questions. Should he be sent back to the minors? I think he did spend a little bit of time in the minors last year because he just did not look like a major league player last year. He did not look ready, at least in that first half of the season last year. But post All-Star break, Daulton Varsho had a 290 average at 879 OPS and 10 home runs in 60 games. Before the All-Star break in 35 games, 143 average, a 464 OPS, and just one home run. He basically doubled his numbers across the board and added 10 more home runs to that home run total. He was easily looking like an all-star in the second half of last season, which is kind of sad because if he put up the second half he had in the first half last year, he might have been a Dbacks all-star, which is really phenomenal. So can he get back to that all-star form in the second half this season? Well, this is what he needs to work on, and it's really something we've already touched on, and it's twofold. He has to get better at drawing walks while also striking out less. It's very simple. It's a very, it's not a very minutia topic, right? Saying he has to walk more and strike out less, like that's an obvious thing. You want all your players to do that. But for Daulton Varsho, it's even more apparent because the first 2 years in the league for Daulton Varsho, walk percentage, it was around 10%. This is someone that got on base via the walk around 10% of the time his first 2 years in the league. But this season, it's only around 6.5%. That is a drastic drop off when you're playing little percentages like this. 10% to 6.5% with walks is a big drop off. That's like, I don't know how many more walks, but think about how many opportunities where Daulton Varsho came up with runners in scoring position and he struck out. Imagine if all those were instead strikeouts, instead they were walks and he got on base. Imagine how many games would have been different if those Daulton Varsho strikeouts were walks instead, because his strikeout to walk ratio is way higher this year than any other Daulton Varsho season. So I think that's the biggest thing he has to work on. It's just striking out less and walking more. And maybe it's because of the philosophy with the new hitting coach. Maybe the Dbacks are being more aggressive, but you look at like the swing percentages as the Dbacks team, like the Dbacks are one of the teams that chase pitches out the strike zone the least in Major League Baseball. Like this D-backs team takes a lot of pitches. They don't swing at a lot of pitches and they don't chase a lot of pitches. So it's been frustrating to see Daulton Varsho be the one striking out so much because we know his level of talent. We know how good he is. And this D-backs team actually has pretty good play discipline, but Daulton Varsho is someone that has struggled a little bit with that this season. So I think that's the biggest area he needs to improve upon. But let me throw a quick positive to Daulton Varsho before we wrap up, because even though we said he needs to work on all these things, even though we're hoping his second half could be a lot better than his first half, just like how it was last year, I still want to shine a little light on this season, despite it feeling a little bit of an up and down season, some struggles, some high notes, some low notes for Daulton Varsho. I still want to highlight that he's basically matched all his career highs that he's put up last season in basically 20 less games. Like if you look at Daulton Varsho's stats just straight across the board, they're basically the same as what it was last year, even his slash line. So basically is what I'm saying is if Daulton Varsho has another great second half like he did last year, he's not only going to be playing like an all-star, he's going to be looking like an all-star every day post all-star break, because last year, post all-star break, he kind of looked like an all-star. This year, he has already shown flashes pre-all-star break of looking like an all-star. And if he is able to take another leap after all-star break like he did last year, this man might look like an all-star every day, and we might actually be talking about a star in the making for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, I want to do our trade candidate power rankings. And if you want to bet on a D-back being traded this season, you need to head to betonline.net, because it's your number one source for your betting needs and sports info. Find the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Let's get back into the podcast. And I want to discuss the power rankings. I want to do an early trade deadline primer because we're about 4 weeks or so out from the MLB trade deadline. I want to discuss some candidates for the D-backs because we're basically in the stretch run of trade deadline season. Over the next month, how the D-backs play as a team, how their certain players on this team plays is going to determine who gets moved at the trade deadline, who's a keeper, who's a seller, who's a buyer, all those fun trade deadline terms. Are the D-backs going to be buyers or sellers at the deadline? I'm leaning towards sellers as of July 5th, the time of the D-backs, at the time of me recording this, not the time of the D-backs recording, but at the time of me recording this on July 5th at 7:35 p.m., I am leaning toward the sell job for the D-backs. But over the next 4 weeks, if somehow the D-backs get hot, starting with this series against the Giants, if the D-backs get hot, I don't have any faith or hope in this, but if somehow they get hot and get within 4.5 games of the wild card race, then I'll change my expectations for the D-backs at the trade deadline. But right now, I'm going to do this topic like the D-backs are going to be sellers. If they continue at this rate, the D-backs will be around a 70-win team like I thought in the preseason, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be sellers at the deadline if they can, get back some interesting young pieces and also call up some young guys to replace the dudes we're trading for the rest of the season. I think that would be pretty interesting if the D-backs become sellers at the deadline. Let's start calling up the young guys and seeing what they got. So let's do a little power ranking of the guys who I think are most likely to be traded by the D-backs, especially depending on their play over the next few weeks. Should I start with the bottom or the top? I think I'm going to start with the top and do would it be reverse order? I'm not too sure, but we're going to start, I guess it'll be reverse order power rankings because a lot of people like to start at the bottom, work their way to the top, but I think this is more fun working our way from the top to the bottom. So let's start with number 1 on my list. And unfortunately, it's fan favorite David Peralta, who I think is probably the most likely D-backs candidate to be traded. He's got a pretty good slash line. Like David Peralta's stats, I think, have been kind of underrated, at least by me personally. I think I've kind of underrated the season David Peralta has had. In my mind, he hasn't been as good as I thought this year, but when I look at his baseball reference, I don't know why it sounded like I couldn't speak. When I look at his baseball reference and his stat line, like David Peralta's having a pretty good season. Is he an all-star this year? No, he's not an all-star, but is he an above-average major leaguer? Yeah, David Peralta has been an above-average major leaguer this year, and he could greatly improve any outfield of a contender that actually needs him. He could basically be the Eddie Rosario or the Jorge Soler to someone Atlanta Braves team if they want to make a run. I don't want to get Soler's name wrong because I am Hispanic. I want to put the respect on his name. So Peralta, he's got like a 250 average, 800 OPS slash line. Like he's right around there in terms of his numbers. I don't know why I'm starting to struggle to speak all of a sudden with 11 home runs. I think that was the most surprising part of the D-backs, of David Peralta's slash line when I looked at it, was 11 home runs. I knew he had power. I knew he had pop. I guess I didn't realize he had 11 already this season. I guess I felt like it was more like last season where he was more of a doubles, triples guy than a home run guy. But David Peralta might get back to that 20-25 home run power, which would be huge for his trade value. He's a guy that actually gets better with runners in scoring position and his numbers stay the same in high leverage moments. Like you can absolutely trust him with men on the bases in a big spot. David Peralta is easily one of the clutchest guys on this D-backs team. And I don't know, after Ketel Marte, like David Peralta might be the guy I want up at the plate when it comes to bases loaded or run scoring situation. He's a great defender. We can't forget this is a guy who's consistently in the Gold Glove, consistently a Gold Glove candidate. And he's also in the final year of his deal. So he's gonna be cheap. I think he's making like around $8 million. Like David Peralta won't break your bank, and you're adding a really good defensive outfielder, a veteran with some pop, clutch. I think he's the most likely guy to be traded at the deadline for all those reasons I just mentioned. Maybe I'm starting to struggle to speak because I'm kind of distracted by this D-backs game. Like I said, I'm recording this actually during the game, so the D-backs they have allowed bases loaded with 2 outs, 2 strikes, and we got Middleton on the mound. So we're definitely going to be talking about this. I'm going to be talking about this after the game for sure. That's going to be segment number 1 at the time of you guys listening. So I should probably get off this soapbox already. But number 2 on this trade candidate power rankings, I'm going to have Mark Melancon, which might seem like a surprise because guess what? I know Mark Melancon has not been good this season, but guess what? I think he would be a reclamation project for someone, and Middleton got out the inning. I think someone could convince themselves that Mark Melancon could be good in their situation. They probably just look at the history of Mike Hazen signings and they're like, this guy doesn't know what to do with a bullpen. Torey Lovello doesn't know what to do with these aging veterans. And we traded someone like Joakim Soria last year who struggled with the D-backs, but we were able to move him to the Blue Jays. So I think Mark Melancon is going to be the same kind of thing. He's owed like $6 million this year. He's got like a $7 million option next year. This was the guy who led the National League in saves last year and was an all-star. Like, it's not that far removed from Mark Melancon being one of the best closers in baseball. It just hasn't worked out for the D-backs. So I could definitely see a contender tricking themselves into thinking that Mark Melancon could be the closer or at least a back-end reliever for them. Number 3 on my trade candidate power rankings, I got Madison Bumgarner. And you can make the argument maybe Mad Bum should be number 2, number 1 on this list. Maybe he should be higher, but I can't put him higher than number 3 just because he's owed $60 million over the next 3 years. That's including this year. And listen, I know he's having a fantastic season by his standards in a D-backs uniform, but I don't know how many teams are going to be believers of Madison Bumgarner when he's owed basically $20 million a year. People might like the way that Mad Bum looks, but they also always look like his first 2 years in Arizona. And if they think he's going to regress back to the mean, I don't know if they want to pay that guy $20 million a year. And he's also, I don't know how many teams would be dubious of what Mad Bum looks like without Brent Strom. Like, I think everyone knows Brent Strom is like King Midas. Like, Mad Bum did not look good the last 2 years. Then all of a sudden, Brent Strom comes over and Mad Bum's back to looking like not an all-star, but at least a number 2 starter, number 3 starter in a rotation. So maybe teams would actually be dubious and have some concerns of what Mad Bum would look like outside the Brent Strom situation. But there's also a lot of dumb teams out there that are willing to make crazy moves and just take the risk on guys like a Mad Bum. And I wouldn't take the risk on a Mad Bum. Like I told Sully Baseball, like if I'm Minnesota, I am definitely not giving up a blue chip prospect for Madison Bumgarner. But the D-backs are able to swindle a team and get like someone's like, I don't know, 10th best prospect. Like if we could get someone's 10th to 15th best prospect from their organization for Madison Bumgarner, and maybe we have to pay like 10% of his contract, I'm down to do that deal. I just feel like it's too hard to move Mad Bum on that contract without Brent Strom also being thrown in the deal. And then number 4 on my power ranking, I'm leaving this up to you guys, the listeners, because I put other here. I made like a multiple choice test, and maybe I'll put this as a poll on Twitter. Follow me at Creator Thomas 24 for my personal account, or Locked On Diamondbacks both Twitter and Instagram. Just search up the podcast handle, because I could do a little Twitter poll. Who do you think is most likely to be traded? I'll put Peralta as an option. I'll put Melancon as an option. I'll put Mad Bum as an option. And I'll put other as the 4th option, because for other, I have 3 names listed, actually. I have Merrill Kelly, who you guys probably don't want to hear as a trade candidate, but he is a guy in his early to mid 30s. Maybe a contender looks at Kelly and says he's the perfect guy we need in the back end of our rotation. He makes between $7 and $8.5 million over the next 3 years. So he's definitely cost friendly. He's been pretty good this season. He's been pretty good like the last 3 years. Like low key, he's been probably the second best D-back starter. Of course, Zach Allen's the best, but he's easily the second best D-back starter over the last 3 years. And he's kind of been the healthiest. He's been kind of the workhorse for the D-backs over the last 3 years. So I could definitely see a team talking themselves into Merrill Kelly, and I think that would be the right decision by that team. The other candidate I have 2 other candidates written down here under other. I have Ian Kennedy, who has been way better than Mark Melancon this year. I just feel like there's a little bit more equity built in with Mark Melancon. I just feel like people still view him as a higher valued asset than Ian Kennedy, even though Ian Kennedy's having a better season. And Kennedy's on just a 1-year deal, so it probably wouldn't take much to acquire him from the D-backs, because I doubt the D-backs are going to get a good prospect back in the Ian Kennedy trade. And then the last guy who I don't want to see traded, but could be a potential candidate for someone, is Christian Walker, who is still arbitration eligible for like another couple years, and he just crushes balls. He's gonna be cheap for someone. And if you're just talking about a defensive first baseman that could get you 30 home runs, like Christian Walker's perfect. On a contender, he's probably someone's like number 6 hitter, but if your number 6 hitter is getting you like 30 plus home runs and playing some of the best defense at first base in the league, most contenders would definitely take that. And I could see a contender making the calls for Christian Walker. I just hope Mike Hazen hangs up the phone, just because I think he's so cheap and he's still like in his early 30s and he crushes the ball. Like, I don't want to see Christian Walker traded. I just feel like the value there would definitely not be a positive net value. Like, it probably won't be a positive net value in any of these trades, but I could understand the Peraltas, the Melancons, and the Mad Bums trades. I just wouldn't understand a Christian Walker trade. So for that reason, I would at least keep him on the Dbacks roster. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Thank you to everyone who tuned into today's podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Now, make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces!